Industries. We're so happy you could be here, and welcome to Davos. I hope your conference is off to a great start. We will be looking forward to informing you and entertaining you this morning. Allow me to introduce our guests here on the stage. So we'll start with Deemah Al Yahya. She's the Secretary General of Digital Cooperation Organization. Then we have Aiman Ezzat. He's the CEO of Capgemini, which is based in France, and he's also in the Alliance. He's the CEO for Climate Leaders. And then we have Börje Ekholm, who's President and CEO of Ericsson. And then Hans Kobler is here to my left. He's the founder and managing partner of Energy Impact Partners USA. So to start with, the size and scope of digital transformation is massive. By some estimates, it could unlock about $100 trillion over the next decade, and a lot's at stake. There's a lot of ways that it can go off the rails, so we need to make sure that we put the processes in place now to make sure that we can unlock all of that potential while also doing it responsibly across borders, across government lines, and do it all probably collectively. So I guess the first question for you all on the panel is, within each of your sectors, you sit within tech, within climate, within energy, government, how do you see this opportunity? How are you thinking about it? What size impact could a digital transformation make? Hans, we could start with you.
So we are investing in climate tech, so I take that position. For climate tech, digitization is very, very important because it addresses one of the key bottlenecks that we are facing, which is the high intermittency of the clean electron. So let me give you some background on that. The world, when it goes towards net zero, the clean electron is pretty much the fuel of choice here, but it comes with two major drawbacks. One, it's highly intermittent. We always had that on the demand side when you plug in your DC fast charger or turn on the TV. Now we have it on the supply side. The wind doesn't blow, the sun doesn't shine. The second thing about the electron is it basically has no storage. It's the only commodity where you don't have storage. Grain, wheat, gas, oil. Oil has 72 days of reserve. The electricity is 70 minutes, right? So that's a major problem, and it turns out that digitizing the interaction between supply and demand helps fix that. You can lay wires, but that's hard. Nobody wants those in their backyards. Storage, we are getting there pretty much. We have a couple of investments in the sector, building a 1.7 gigawatt hour battery, but that takes money and a lot of time. And digitization makes it much easier. Don't charge your car at 6 p.m. Turn down the air conditioner a little bit when power is needed, give the tomatoes and strawberries a rest. And so that's where digitization comes in, and very important for our industry.
And Börje, what about from your perspective in the tech sector?
I think digitalization is going to play a major role in the economy going forward, much more than it has, clearly. And just pick a couple of examples. So take supply chains. For the last decades, 3 decades or so, we've optimized global supply chains based on cost. And they're superbly efficient and well planned. We're entering now a world where they will be fragmented. So we need to create and digitalize the full supply chains going forward. It's going to be a massive opportunity. Think about factories. We're going to automate factories in many new ways. So we see, for example, our own factory that we built in the US. It's leveraging all new technologies, digital twins, AI, machine learning, automated vehicles, self-guided vehicles. And we see a massive improvement in productivity, almost twice the labor productivity compared to our other factories, despite having lower scale. It uses 1/4 less energy, 3/4 less wastewater. So it's massive improvements coming out of digitalizing manufacturing. But all of this requires one thing, and that's why I want to bring it back to, is the digital infrastructure. We cannot digitalize industries, supply chains, companies, society, unless we get a digital infrastructure that's high performance, secure, and reliable. And this is where I think technologies like 5G come in. They will play a very important role in digitalizing societies. And it's often overlooked because we take connectivity for granted. But just think about the consumer. How did the consumer digitalize? It's now You know, how many have a DVD at home? How many has a photo album at home? Most of it sits on a smartphone. That's digitalizing the consumer based on 4G technology. We see enterprises will be digitalized based on 5G technology, because anything that can go wireless will go wireless. That's why we need high-performance infrastructure, and that's often overlooked.
Aiman, from where you sit, and you also, one thing I want to touch on, you wrote a great essay about how we can't do digital transformation without doing a sustainable transformation at the same time. I was hoping you could speak a little bit to that.
Sure. So, I mean, the way to look at it, we're going through a digital revolution that is equivalent to the industrial revolution. You know, the rules of the games are changing. How you create value, how you produce, how you innovate, you know, how you operate, how you establish and manage customer relationship, everything is changing. So there is challenges, but there's a big opportunity, because we can build all of that new world to become a sustainable world. And I think this is where the opportunity is how do we take advantage of the fact that we have to completely change, you know, the supply chain of automotive to be able to build these new cars, to make that sustainable. Energy, the same thing. We're building new energy. All this investment in renewable. How do we ensure this becomes sustainable? And we talked about supply chain. The problem is actually, when we look at supply chain today, they are linear. We have to think circular. So it's reverse logistics, reverse supply chain. Very difficult for people to change to. So there's a lot of opportunities, and we have to take advantage of this trillions and trillions of investments that are going to build a digital economy to make sure that we build a sustainable world with these investments.
And Deemah, I'm curious what your perspective is on how government can play a role in removing roadblocks so that we can build the digital infrastructure that we need. No group can do it alone. The private sector can't do it alone. Governments can't do it alone. How do we best collaborate to make progress here?
Exactly. You said the magic word, collaboration. And looking at the speed of the digital transformation and the rapid increase of the digital economy that is expected to be 70% of the global GDP by 2030, if we don't cooperate and work together now, we will miss on harnessing a great opportunity, and the digital divide will increase between nations. And this goes to a point where talking about connectivity, and it just really alarms me knowing that 60% of the population now is not connected. And even if the connectivity is available, they're not on the internet because of either affordability or availability. And these challenges cannot be solved just by one nation alone or private sector alone, but we have to create that the right methods of cooperation between the digital ecosystem to create a global inclusive digital economy. And this is what we're doing actually in DCO, the Digital Cooperation Organization, which is creating that space where we facilitate between the supply and demand, and where is actually the nations that need the support, and directing the investments of the private sector to the right investments in a secure and protected manner to accelerate the growth of the digital economy in these nations.
I think your point about connectedness is very important. Börje, you actually just wrote an essay about how you think one of the biggest inequalities in the world is between the connected and unconnected. Could you dive a little bit more into that and some solutions that we can start working on together?
And we often think about that divide between the have and have-nots, between I would call fortunate countries and less fortunate countries, but it applies within countries as well. So, you know, I was up in Alaska, a remote part of Alaska, and they had just gotten wireless connectivity. And you get to hear the people starting to talk about education, healthcare access, and kind of just communication access in a very different way. So I think this digital divide is not only between countries, it's within countries. And it's something we really need to work on. And just to tie on to one of your points, it's affordability, I think, is important. So we need to get prices continue to come down. The global standard, we have today 8 billion subscribers on one standard. That's bringing the cost down, so we need to maintain that global standard, really important. But I would also highlight a couple of other things. Skills. How do we make sure we train people to leverage the new technologies in the right way? So even if you can go online, you're not online because you're afraid you don't have the capabilities. So here I think we need to as I think industries, companies, as well as the political system needs to really get engaged in training people, training young people into learning how to connect, how to leverage the skills. But also there is an upskilling need that's going to be dramatic. And I often talk about, I mean, the Industrial Revolution removed agricultural jobs. Actually, we went from almost 100% in agriculture to today most countries are below 5%. So that means everybody got other jobs. Digital will mean the same thing. So we will have today a lot of people in jobs that are going to get automated away, they're going to disappear. But I'm convinced there are going to be more jobs in the future, but they will be different skills, different capabilities. So we need to, as companies, invest much more in quality upskilling of the workforce. And that's where I think we sometimes forget the skill dimension. We need to make sure we have the connectivity for everyone. I think it's about 3 billion unconnected. They need to be connected. But we also need to focus as much on the skill side.
I can just build
Yes,
on
please.
that. So we work with companies across the world to help them move to the digital economy, drive digital transformation in a sustainable way. The biggest challenge I see to that transition is the lack of talent. There's a huge shortage of talent across the world. And it's not all about engineers. We need to develop a lot of short curriculum. You need plenty of software engineers. Every single product and service will be managed through a digital platform, which will be connected. But we don't need only engineers to drive. We need engineers to conceive it, but then to maintain it, to update the code, to do that. We don't need people who have gone through 5 years of studies. We need people who are data analysts, who are software developers, who have gone through short curriculums, through apprenticeship, like we have done in manufacturing. So we have to open that new world and change fundamentally, and definitely government have a huge role to play to basically encourage this new curriculum to ensure that we're able to build the skills required to take advantage of the new digital economy.
I think that reskilling is a huge point to make, and I think that a question I would put to you, I think I know the answer to. Can we solve some of these giant problems like the lack of talent, or the lack of numbers of talent that we need to supply for jobs? Can we solve climate change? Can we do any of these big problems that we're facing in the world without a digital transformation? Or is it a bit existential that we do this?
I can jump on that.
Sure.
Well, I think that looking at the positives, or looking at the positive narrative of digital transformation, why should we imagine that we can prosper without? It is a necessity, and it is increasing the quality of life of humans. Also, the way we're doing business, we're becoming more efficient. We're reducing cost in terms of establishment. We're becoming more reliable. We're personalizing and customizing services for citizens and customers. So therefore, the benefits are a lot. I think we should focus on how to utilize technology better and how to use it in a better manner to create more jobs and to increase the GDP and economy rather than imagining a life without digital transformation.
Just to add to that, I see maybe a parallel also to the move towards net zero climate tech. A lot of the technologies are out there. 80% of them are there. They just need to be deployed. And for that, you need to have the confidence of the customer that you can use them and they are reliable and they are affordable. And so that is a major challenge. We have a number of technologies, for example, they use AI to detect methane leaks. Methane, terrible for the environment. But it takes a long time to get the customer comfortable with that, and then they need the people, the service people on the ground to actually deal with those technologies. So a lot of it is just making it happen. And our perspective on that is, we bring a lot of the innovators in a room with the corporates, with the incumbents, and try to get them to work together to make it easier, get them comfortable with that. And I think that could do a great deal of moving the ball forward.
I think technology and data, because data is really at the center of everything today, are absolutely required to be able to achieve a lot of this improvement and really achieve what we want to do in terms of having a more sustainable world and give a new impetus in terms of economic growth. You use the AI to be able to optimize the efficiency, the energy efficiency of buildings. Okay, on how we completely relook supply chains. You need data to be able to understand how you're measuring things around your scope 3. If not, you cannot. If you don't have the measurement of your scope 3, you'll never be able to achieve net zero. You need to understand what are the tactical points and need to create it across an ecosystem, across the value chain, and create that transparency. Without digital technology, it's impossible to do that. We'll never be able to do it. So I think it's very important. On the other side, there is an impact on society of the move and there are some risks that we have to address. Okay, so we talked about, of course, the lack of skills, but there is all the data privacy and ethics around data that's going to be very important. The cybersecurity risks that are increasing, the world becoming more connected, the increase of risk of cyber. Ensuring that we invest to create a sustainable world, and the point you made around the digital exclusion, how do you ensure that it's digital inclusion and not digital exclusion? So these are impact of society coming from that transition to a digital economy that we have to address at the same time as we're pouring trillions to be able to move to that digital economy.
But my point is also that we have always addressed those changes in the past. It's not, we tend to think about the challenges of transformation as something bad. It's not. I think the world, if you look at the planet, we're better off as a planet today than we were 100 years ago. I think that's going to happen again. But we'll be it in a more sustainable way in the future. We'll be protecting our resources, and here digital plays a role. And that's why I think this evolution, it's a bit like thinking about swimming. Swimming, you think, it's not, yes, you had the new swimsuits for a while, but the reality is it's better methods of training, better methods of swimming, the technique is better, and all of a sudden you're so much faster in a pool where normally everybody should be on the equal playing field, right? And the same thing is in this world. We're going to evolve, we're going to change, and we're going to adjust, but we need some investments, and that's what I think we need to recognize. It's not bad.
I think I want to dig into the investment needed and how to continue building out the digital infrastructure, which is not fully built, so that we can be fully ready for this. But a lot of the technology, as you're saying, is here. I was at a dinner last night, and someone provocatively said, ChatGPT is like child's play compared to what others are sitting on with AI. It's here, and it's ready to be deployed, but are we ready for the deployment? This is moving so quickly, and transformation is happening so fast. How do we make these really incredibly important decisions now before the train has fully left the station? I haven't heard a good solution, so if you guys have any ideas, I'd love to hear.
I think it's important not to think about technology for the purpose of pure technology. Right now there's a big hype around the metaverse. The metaverse is actually composed of many different technologies that exist already that we master. Digital twins, AR, VR, AI, cloud, they're all there. The question is, what are the practical use cases that are going to create value for companies, for government, for society? That's what we have to focus the energy on. So not on the hype of the technology, but the practical uses of technology. The same thing happened around AI. When AI came, a lot of excitement. Today we have databases of use cases by industry in terms of how you can apply AI to create value. So we have to do that with technology. We have to put the practical use of technology. And this is collaborative work we do with our clients, we do with partners to see how can you apply, how can you create value, and not just get only the hype about technology.
If I can add to that, it's very important, as digital transformation is, to put the human in the center of everything that we are doing. It's not just a matter of just using technology for the hype of technology. We've been visiting a lot of our member countries and also looking at where are the priorities are, from Pakistan to Bangladesh to Nigeria to Rwanda, and you visit and see a land where they're 20% connected, but they're working on their cryptocurrency policy. So where are the priorities, and where should we put our bets? And I think that the more we look at these technologies and we follow the hypes, we're missing on the infrastructure that will enable the youth and the talents of these countries to create new innovations that will serve their countries and serve the private sector as well.
Börje?
Yeah, I want to tie on to this. I sometimes think of the introduction of 4G in the world, where there was a lot of debate about what is the killer application. And everybody wants to find that killer application, being in some countries think it's crypto, it's going to be, but everybody wants to find that killer application. I think that's the worst thing we can do, because the killer application will be known after the fact. I mean, we recognize that 4G would be good for video transmission. Right? That was easy to see, so video would play a role. But we had no idea it would be short video format like YouTube or TikTok or Instagram, etc. That would demand a lot of the capacity in the networks. We had no idea ride-hailing services would be launched. We didn't think about those. And the same thing now, we start to talk about we need that killer application, XR, VR, whatever it is, on 5G. But the reality is it will come once the infrastructure is there. So the infrastructure is so critically important to get in place, not only for the countries where we have a large portion unconnected, I would say for the whole world, because that's going to drive a completely new set of use cases that we don't see today. And we don't have the idea how to come up with it either.
What digital infrastructure is needed? Some of the groundwork has been laid, and I know you were on the front lines of rolling out 5G around the world, Börje, so I'd wonder what your experience was, the biggest hang-ups, the biggest problems, and what's more is needed.
What we see is the rollout is very fast in China. China has decided that they're going to be a competitor in the digital economy, so they are rolling out the infrastructure super fast. The US is rolling out fast, but a bit slower. Then we see pockets. Middle East is rolling out fast. And we see some other parts like Northeast Asia, Korea is early. All of these countries are doing it in order to drive job creation in their economies. But they're also recognizing one more fact, which is that the party that's going to provide the capital needs to make a return on investment. So as a matter of fact, companies in those regions that are front runners on 5G, for example, they actually make money. And I think that's an important part to think about here in Europe, for example. We're way behind. We're much slower at rolling out. And if you look at the European operators, they are not making money. They're not returning cost of capital. And if you don't return cost of capital, what should you do? You should invest less. And that's exactly what's happening here. So unfortunately, economics work in practice for Europe, but other regions are not seeing that. They're seeing this to be a way to stay on the forefront, to drive the general economy. But so when you say that it's barriers, they vary a bit by country. They are different. So Europe, it's clearly that they don't make money. But we also see another very difficult regulatory environment in general for the operators, which makes it difficult to provide the capital to roll out. And that, I think, slows down regions. So if we look now, I think, and it's almost a well-kept secret, but India will probably have the strongest digital infrastructure outside of China in 6 months. With the pace that they are rolling out, they will be at the forefront of having the infrastructure. Because there they have recognized Digital India as being such an important program from the government. And they have recognized will not be there unless we have the infrastructure. So we see those investments happening very, very fast right now.
I guess the question too is when and how should regulation happen? It can stifle innovation and slow it down, but we all know that without regulation, these things can go off the rails. I mean, I think crypto is experiencing that a bit now. Deemah, do you have a perspective on when government should get involved or when it should lay off?
Well, a very interesting question, and that's actually the forefront of what we do. The narrative should change, and the mindset should change. The more innovations are being created, the more governments, because they don't understand these innovations, so they regulate. And they regulate in a way where it doesn't help for these innovations to strive. So therefore, that narrative and that communication has to happen. And this is where we're facilitating, where private sector is engaged in the co-creation and co-design of these policies and regulations. So you see a lot of countries involving the private sector in this kind of process, like creating sandboxes, especially in fintech, for instance, in central banks, and also in the education sector and health tech as well. So these sandboxes help the private sector to be part of innovating in policy and regulation, and coming up with a unified policy that will be adaptable between the private sector and government. But it needs a lot of work. Still, we're not there yet, but at least that narrative should change, and countries and governments are understanding that they have to include the private sector in such kind of design.
I mean, Europe tends to over-regulate. US takes more its time around regulation, but it ends up by happening. But I think, if I look from a European perspective, things like GDPR were very good to be able to do all the protection around data privacy, And I think that was very important. But in some cases, Europe tends to over-regulate and over-regulate far too quickly and too far. For example, we have all the discussion today around how to avoid greenwashing in terms of reporting. But when you look at the constraint they put around the reporting, nobody's going to report anything in terms of being green, because it's overly complicated and too constraining. It's almost like, okay, let's not even go there. So we have to try to find the right balance to be able to have regulation, and the challenge, regulation has to be global. You deal with global companies. You cannot have part of the supply chain on one side regulated in a certain way in Europe and then no regulation in the US or different regulation in Asia. It's extremely very complicated. So we have to find a way. We need to get government and people like WEF to help in terms of creating some standards, some discussion around how to also have common regulation across the world. If not, global companies cannot operate.
And that's exactly what DCO is doing. So we are harmonizing these policies and regulations between member countries.
The problem is countries that lead with regulation will struggle. But I think much more of it from a small startup point of view. Think about if your first 5 million euros goes into making sure you're compliant with regulation, the likelihood you get those first 5 million euros are zero. Right? So there will be no startups. That's why leading with regulation is a problem. And I think here Europe has been overly aggressive, and I think it's hurting the economy.
We have the same in our investment sector. Europe issued Article 8, Article 9 to clarify funds, and we want to comply and be supportive of that, but then you put a burden on those startups that they have to spend tens of hours at the early stages just to provide you with enormous amounts of data. So the Europeans, I'm European, but I live in America, they tend to over-regulate, right? And find the balance between letting the entrepreneurs solve the problem and providing a framework, that's the hard part.
Do you think Europe is at danger of being left behind?
In our sector, yes, I have to say. I mean, the Americans here, after not doing anything for a long time, I don't know if you know, they issued the IRA, which puts in $380 billion into our sector and sort of improves the margins of some of our products by a factor 2. So that suddenly, from not caring at all, changed the landscape completely, and you see a big sucking sound out of Europe of the great technologies who realize, well, less regulation, more money, one big market, and that's hard to compete.
We have seen through recent research we have done, around priorities for investment. We saw that on the sustainability side, it has been deprioritized among European companies to deal with the issues around inflation, energy crisis. It came down. On the other side, the IRA has given a boost in the US, and we have seen this become a bigger priority because of the incentives. So you need to provide regulation, but you also need to provide incentives. You cannot drive everything just through regulation. You need a proper balance between both.
So in a few minutes, I'm going to open it up to audience questions. So be thinking about anything that you'd like to ask. But in the meantime, we have been talking about who should be bankrolling this. Is it the private sector? Is it government? Is it a combination? Just in the example of ChatGPT, I mean, they are tied at the hip to Microsoft. They've pumped $10 billion, more is going in. That is funded by Microsoft. Should that be the case? Do the incumbents need to be creating this innovation in partnership with startups? But where should the financing come from?
So it should come from both. I think the private sector will drive a lot of financing around a number of areas, okay? And it has been doing it for over the years and over the decades. So I don't think this is going to change because it's good use of money that have good, ROI, sometimes with a longer-term perspective in terms of investment. But without that, we will not have any renewables or anything. So that mentality exists definitely in the private sector. But the government has to play its part and play its part. I mean, there is a digitization, there is a digital economy part of government we are working on, in terms of public service, in terms of making everybody's life much more efficient, to be able to do things much more quickly, to launch a company, issue stock, etc. All this can be digitized. This is on the government side to be able to do, and especially they are on the driving seat on the policy side. And the policy side is very important to enable the investment on the private sector. And policy, not just emitting a policy, but ensuring that the policy doesn't change after 2 years, because that really kills all investment initiatives. So policy, more global to the extent as we can, and especially constant over time, because that's what brings investment money.
Hans,
I would say in almost all situations, the private sector is much more efficient in allocating capital than the government. Now, there are some exceptions when you need to fix some global competitive problems that we have right now with China, whether that's minerals, battery supply. So you have to intervene sometimes, but 90% of the time I would trust the private sector much more, allocating the capital.
And you just raised a big fund. How are you thinking about allocating your capital in the most impactful way for innovation and transformation?
So we work very closely with corporate. So about a third of our capital is from 60 plus corporate partners. So we put them in a room and they tell us about their pain points and what works for them, what doesn't work for them, which comes back to what I said before, that a lot of the technologies are out there. We just have to get people comfortable deploying those. And the sectors we like a lot is the digital technologies as they make that hard part in between smarter. We focus on decarbonizing supply, electrifying, making sustainable demand, but connecting the two, that's hard. That's where you need AI, where you need to digitize, and that's what we get excited about.
Trust is a big factor in the hesitancy to deploy, it sounds like. Any ideas on how we can start repairing that within the sector? I mean, I think people don't trust that jobs will be protected, that things will progress in a healthy and safe way moving forward. How do we start rebuilding that trust with corporates, with everybody?
Listen, I think every time there's change, there is a bit that trust, right? Because fundamentally, human beings don't like change. We start adapting to new things, learning new things. So there's always some level of resistance in change. We see it when we do large transformation in companies. It's one of the challenges that you have to deal with. It's about how do you manage the change. It's the same thing. You have to manage the change in society. So you have to make people comfortable. Some policies can make people comfortable, but also education, awareness, and successes, really showing the value and the benefits. It's what builds the trust. And it's a progression. It will not happen overnight, but we have to do it, because if not, there will be a lot of resistance to the change. See, we had a huge amount of resistance to deployment of 5G in France that delayed actually France in terms of deploying 5G and had an impact on competitiveness. So we need to have this open dialogue and collaboration, and also try to sell a lot the benefits and make people more aware and more educated about all these changes.
But I also think it's about preparing people for the change, which ties me back to one thing that's very close to my heart, is education systems. The governments, I think, plays a very important role in regulation, as we discussed before. But I also think it plays a very important role in preparing people for the change, which is developing the right skills, the right capabilities, and also how you interact in that new society. Then I think we can get, maybe not the trust will come over time, but we can also prepare the population for that change. I think that's going to be important for the future. And at the same time, I'm a big optimist, and I do believe that entrepreneurs around the world will solve these problems. And sometimes we focus on them as almost unsurmountable. We've seen that in the past, and typically there comes some entrepreneur, they get some funding from some venture capitalist or private equity, and all of a sudden they have solved the problem. We just need to, as a society, create the right foundation for those people to actually do these things.
Any questions from the audience? Yes, here in the front.
Hi, Annelise Sachs from Analog Devices, a semiconductor company. So Bjorn, you talked about the consumers having digitalized in 4G and enterprise digitalizing in 5G, so about private networks. Can all of you talk a little bit more about the big bets on this area, as well as the timing of it?
I mean, I can start maybe, but I think you may be better at commenting than me. But what we see is, to digitalize enterprises, we will need to have improved connectivity. And it cannot be all wire-based. If you have rotating machinery, simply it's not possible. And actually, wireless provides a lot of unique capabilities to know exactly where things are, etc. So I do believe we are going to see this, but where we are right now, we're at the POC stage. We're testing more proof of concepts. They're not industrialized applications yet. And I think there is, maybe we can say it's a bit slower than we had hoped for, but I think also these type of changes take some time. It almost have to start with greenfield operations, and then you adjust them. But we're starting to see examples. Our own factory is one. Port of Belfast is today much more automated than it was before, built on a private network, where they're becoming about 10% more energy efficient just by rudimentary connectivity, to be honest. So what we see here is a substantial benefit, but it's very, very early.
I think you have a number of areas, like all the part around digital twin, around factories and virtualization, to be able to manage factories remotely. Without 5G, you can forget it. The reality future of mobility without 5G does not exist. If you have autonomous cars, everything has to be interconnected. If you don't have 5G, you'll never be able to do it. So all this is going to be required. Now, they're all at early stages in terms of development. Some things are more advanced, like you think about warehouse management, 5G to be able to automate warehouses. This is more advanced. But there are many new POCs. They're not yet at scale, and there are many new companies that have basically, for the countries where you have private licenses, that take private licenses and start working on all this automation field to be able to collect the data, to be able to automate the factories, to create their digital twins, to get interconnection around their supply chains. 5G will be critical for all of that.
In the back.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Daniel Feldman, architect from Columbia, Young Global Leader. Thank you for this talk. It's super interesting. You have mentioned many words and terms that are true and dear to my heart. You talk about green, net zero production, sustainability, future generations, digitalization. And I wanted to ask if we could talk about something that hasn't been addressed, which is what happens outside the walls of digitalization. These factories are entering the Industry 4.0 world. They're going to be clean production, digitalized production, quiet, silent production. And I'm wondering if this is also an opportunity to rethink the model of the city that we're building, because for so much time we've been doing these amazing factories you're referencing to outside the city, making our workforce have to drive their cars for crazy commutes, and then adding to the, I don't know, 25 to 38% emissions that happen globally due to transport. Is this a moment to also rethink the model of city that we're building and harness the power and the opportunity of digitalization to actually do dense cities that are of mixed use, that are layered, and that allow the new generations, the new digital native people that are going to be working in these factories to bike to work and not have to drive half an hour or 40 minutes or 2 hours to work and back? And that was my question about the cities.
Well, I can take that. A very interesting subject. I was just in a talk with the president of ILO about that, and how the way of doing business is going to change and the way of work is going to change. COVID disrupted the way we look at cities. Before, cities, we look at them either for leisure or either for doing business. And now it's going to be different, where you can work anywhere in the world. You can choose either an island or to do your work, and we have to look at what does the working hours mean, and what does the change of the time zones really mean when it comes to producing or being productive when it comes to work. And looking at the lack of expertise or talents, how are we breaking borders of our countries and making it available to get access to talents from all over the world, and also enabling people to start maintaining or getting jobs outside the borders, but in the comfort of their homes. And this is where technology can enable creating that disseminated working decentralized working environment, and also creating a cognitive cities where not only are they going to be for doing business, but also it will be an innovative environment to create new solutions in the comfort of the location that you desire in living.
But 100%, there are a lot of opportunities to make cities more sustainable, more efficient, right? The baby steps where with AI and digital technologies today, you reroute traffics with traffic lights and you reduce consumption dramatically from redesigning the whole setup, which will take longer, obviously.
But the whole manufacturing footprint is going to change. I mean, that's one of my lessons learned, is we can do with smaller factories closer to where the customer is. Why wouldn't you think about that for other products as well? So I think it's a longer term transition, going to take a long time. But I would see there is an opportunity to move manufacturing back to around cities to support them as well. So I think we're in for some interesting changes. Agriculture is one. Yeah, exactly. Why wouldn't you grow vertical farming in cities? Yeah. Why wouldn't you do that?
And that's what we see in a new project in Saudi Arabia called the Line.
Exactly.
We're looking at creating a vertical environment, a community, rather than a horizontal one that has that cognitive layers of, in terms of agri-tech and also living and increasing the quality of life, where saving the planet also and making sure sustainability is looked at in the focus.
Thank you all for the discussion. Keep up the great work. We look forward to the progress, and thank you all for being in the room and listening.